I used to think promises were just words, until the one I made to my father. He said, "Whatever happens, son, never let the family home leave our name." I swore I wouldn't. For years I worked every extra shift, saved every penny just to keep his promise alive. Our house wasn't much, chipped paint, creaking floors, but it was ours. And more than anything, it was his dream. When he died, I promised I'd protect it no matter what. Then came the letters, the ones with big red stamps that said final notice. Mortgage, late fees, taxes. Every month it felt like the world was closing in. I worked mornings at the shop, nights doing deliveries, barely sleeping, all to keep those walls standing, until one night I collapsed. Hospital, heart monitor beeping, and when I woke up, they told me someone had already bought the house. Signed the papers while I was unconscious. "Impossible," I said, "it's under my name." The nurse just looked at me with pity. Turns out the signature on the sale wasn't mine. It was forged. By my cousin Ryan, the same guy I once called my brother. When I called him, he laughed. "Come on, Ethan, it's just property. You can always get another house." But I couldn't get another promise. That night, I sat in my truck outside the old house, watching strangers move in. They didn't even know what that land meant. That every nail, every board had my father's sweat in it. And I swore one day I'd take it all back. It took me 3 years, 3 long, quiet, invisible years. While everyone thought I'd disappeared, I was studying. Not books met, but people. How real estate worked. How deals were made. How greed functioned. Ryan sold the land to a developer called Holloway Estates. Funny thing, my dad's middle name was Holloway. Almost poetic, right? I started small, buying rundown properties, flipping them, saving everything. Didn't tell a soul. Every contract, every deal, every handshake, I treated like a chess move. And soon enough, I was playing in their league. The same men who once ignored me were now inviting me to dinners. The same company that took my home. They didn't even know the man sitting across the table was the ghost of the one they'd buried. I waited until the time was right. Then I made my move. Bought out their debts quietly. Acquired every property they'd defaulted on, through fake shell companies. Piece by piece, I took their empire apart. And when I finally walked back into their office, they had no idea who I was. Ryan was there, wearing a suit that probably cost more than my old truck. He looked at me blankly until I said, "You really don't remember me, do you?" His face dropped. The color drained from his skin. And I smiled. "You said it was just property, so I bought the street." I went quiet, that's the trick. Silence hides a plan. I rented a small apartment above a laundromat, worked out of a cramped garage fixing cars, and spent every spare hour learning the rules they thought would protect them. I read zoning proposals, title chains, notary logs. I learned how developers thought. I learned how to make paper disappear and reappear under new names. Aaron, an old friend who'd become a real estate agent, was the first person I trusted with the truth. He didn't clap me on the back or promise revenge. He listened, then helped. Quietly, he pointed me to lots the developers had overlooked. A duplex here, a boarded-up bungalow there. Small buys, strategic buys, properties nobody wanted, until the city announced the new redevelopment plan. I didn't buy flashy. I bought placement. The lot next to my cousin's backyard, the duplex that shared an alley with their trash cans. Little by little, under shell LLCs with bland names, Pineview Holdings, Meridian Estates, I stitched together a contiguous chain. When the developers finally filed their proposal, they expected easy buys. They expected minimal resistance. They didn't account for a single name standing between them and the block. Meanwhile, Ryan and his wife spent the sale money like trophies. New furniture, nights at the bar, bragging at the cafe. They thought the story was over. They had no idea the man they'd buried in a hospital gown was becoming the owner of the ground he'd sold. I moved like a ghost on my old street, watching, listening, buying, until I held enough lots to make their plan impossible without me. The power of possession is quiet until it isn't. And when the day came, it hit with the softest, coldest precision. The meeting was held in a small community center. Folding chairs, stale coffee, city planners with polite smiles. Ryan sat there like a man who'd already won. The developer's rep began with the numbers they thought would close mouths. A clean purchase, a quick close, no drama. I let them talk, let them slide their glossy offer across the table. He expected nods, handshakes, the same old town theatrics. Then I tapped the folder at my side. Aaron had already slipped me documents. Timing of the sale, notary stamps, a volunteer's note that put my cousin at my hospital bedside signing papers while I couldn't wake. "Too high," the rep said at first when I named my price. He smiled like men who count on fear. I didn't bargain. I offered terms. Include any properties owned by the parties who executed those documents and price it to reflect the risk of legal exposure. Take the risk or face public delays, lawsuits, headlines. Make it cheap for you and expensive for your timeline. The room shifted. Ryan's bravado frayed into a small weaponless panic. Developers hate uncertainty. They hate headlines. They hate lawyers with time on their hands. And suddenly, the money on the table wasn't enough to buy silence. Negotiations crawled through the afternoon. I sat calm, palms flat on cheap plastic. Aaron watched the calculations flicker across their faces. When the revised offer came, it had protections for me, expedited escrow, an amount that finally matched what I'd demanded. I signed, not because I loved the numbers, but because the game was won on my terms. Walking out under a bright, indifferent sun, Ryan tried to pass me on the sidewalk and muttered something. I didn't turn. The victory was quieter than I expected. A resignation of looks, the slow sinking of a man who realizes his stolen spoils now anchor him to the very thing he thought he'd escaped. Back in my tiny apartment that night, with cheap wine and a confirmation email glowing on my screen, I slept for the first time in months. Not because I was rich, but because the storm I had become had finally found wind. Weeks later, I drove past the street again. Same cracked sidewalks, same mailbox leaning like it always had. Except now, every property on that block, from the corner store to the last picket fence, had one thing in common: my signature. Ryan didn't know yet. He thought the developer still owned everything. He still hosted barbecues, still bragged about how he saved the neighborhood. And when I parked my truck at the corner, nobody recognized me at first. I walked slow, hands in pockets, just taking in the smell of cut grass and evening air. Then a little girl, their daughter, ran across the yard chasing a ball. She stopped, looked up at me and smiled. "Hi, mister." I smiled back. She didn't know the history written under her feet. Ryan came out of the house, beer in hand, half-drunk confidence painted on his face. "Ethan," he said, squinting. "Yeah," I said, calm as stone, "just visiting." He laughed nervously. "Didn't think I'd see you again." "Yeah, I didn't think so either." He tried to act casual, but his eyes darted to the street. He could tell something was off. The survey stakes, the new property signs. He pointed at one. "What's that?" "That?" I said. "That's mine." He laughed again, fake and brittle. "You kidding?" I handed him a folded sheet. Property titles, fresh and sealed. Every one of them with my name. He unfolded them slowly. His smile died with each page. "You bought all of it?" "Everything you sold," I said, "and then some." He tried to speak, but I cut him off. "Who said it was just property, remember?" Silence. His wife stood at the door, confusion turning to fear. I took one last look at the house, my father's house, and said, "It's mine again, always was." The next morning I went to the title office. Simple paperwork, no drama. But when I saw the final document, something in me broke and healed all at once. Owner of record, Ethan Holloway. That last name, my father's middle name. He'd always said, "One day our name will mean something." I guess now it did. I didn't throw a party, didn't post about it. I just went home, not to the new houses I owned, but to the old one. The one that started it all. The new family had already moved out after the buyout. Inside, the air smelled like dust and memory. The walls were bare, but I could still see his shadow, my father's, painting the trim, hammering the shelves, laughing at my crooked nails. I ran my hand along the doorway. The groove where I'd carved my initials as a kid was still there. Each 1998. For the first time in years, I smiled without bitterness. Then I opened the back door, stepped out into the yard, and watched the sunrise hit the street I now owned. Every brick, every tree, every inch of dirt, bought, fought for, reclaimed. And in that light, it didn't feel like revenge anymore. It felt like closure. I whispered, "You can rest now, Dad." Then I locked the door behind me, not to keep anyone out, but because I'd finally come home. The following week, Ryan showed up at my garage. He looked smaller somehow, like the weight of what he'd done finally caught up. He didn't speak right away, just stood there holding a wrinkled envelope. "I came to return something," he said quietly. Inside was a photograph. Me and him as kids standing in front of my father's house holding sparklers. On the back, Dad had written, "Family isn't about blood, it's about promise." For a second, I almost pitied him, but pity doesn't erase betrayal. "I didn't mean for it to go that far," he said. I nodded slowly. "Yeah, neither did I." He looked around the garage, the tools, the smell of oil and iron. "I guess you won," he muttered. I shook my head. "No one wins in revenge, Ryan, we just stop losing." He tried to hand me the photo again, but I pushed it back toward him. "Keep it," I said. "You'll need the reminder more than I do." He nodded once and walked away. No threats, no excuses, just silence. And that silence said everything. When he left, I sat down staring at the grease on my hands. All those years chasing payback, and it came down to this, a picture, an apology, and a house that finally belonged to its rightful name. Funny thing about revenge, it doesn't give peace, it only clears the noise so you can hear your own heart again. That night I opened my father's old toolbox, the one he'd left me when he passed. Inside, under the rusted wrenches, was a folded note. His handwriting. "Don't let pain make you cruel, just stronger." And I finally understood what he meant. A year later, the neighborhood changed. Kids played on the same sidewalks that once carried my father's tired footsteps. The old house, freshly painted, garden trimmed, became the centerpiece of a quiet street that finally felt alive again. Every month I walked through that block, not as an owner but as a keeper. High-funded repairs, planted trees, rebuilt fences. People thought I was doing it out of pride. But it wasn't pride. It was promise. On the anniversary of my father's death, I placed a small wooden sign at the front gate. It read, "For every man who was told he'd lose everything, keep your word, even when it costs you everything else." And then I left a single wrench on the porch, his wrench, old, heavy, unpolished, just like the lessons he gave me. As I turned to leave, a neighbor called out, "Hey, you're the guy who rebuilt this place, right?" I smiled. "Not rebuilt," I said, "just reclaimed." Walking back to my truck, I caught one last glimpse of the house in the rearview mirror, sunlight bouncing off its windows, golden and still. And for the first time in a long time, I didn't feel like I was driving away from something. I felt like I was finally free. Because sometimes revenge isn't about destroying someone else. It's about rebuilding the part of yourself they tried to break. 6 months later, I stood in front of the city council. Not as the broken man who'd lost his home, but as the new owner of Holloway Estates. The name once belonged to the people who stole from me. Now it was mine. I didn't change it. Because I wanted the world to remember what happens when greed meets patience. I started a small housing initiative, affordable homes for veterans, single parents, and families on the edge. Not charity, just balance. Because I knew what it felt like to watch your dream die under someone else's pen. The local paper ran a headline a month later. "Man rebuilds what he was once denied." I didn't keep the clipping. I didn't need to. Some victories don't need frames, they just need to exist quietly. Aaron visited sometimes. He'd sit on the porch with me, sipping coffee, smiling at the calm. "You ever think about tearing it all down?" he asked once. I laughed. "Every day," I said. "But then I remember I built this from nothing. Why destroy what peace finally gave me?" The wind picked up that afternoon. The sound of kids laughing echoed down the street, mixed with the hum of lawnmowers and the smell of fresh-cut grass. It didn't sound like revenge anymore. It sounded like life. Later that night, I opened my father's old photo album. Half the pictures were faded, edges curling with time. But one photo, the one of him smiling in front of the house, looked as clear as ever. And I swear just for a moment I could feel him there beside me, whispering, "You kept your word, son." The world moves fast. People forget promises, forget roots, forget what they once swore they'd protect. But I didn't, because some promises aren't made to be convenient. They're made to remind you who you are. That old street, the one everyone said was worthless, became my greatest teacher. It taught me that pain has purpose, that silence can be a weapon, and that revenge isn't about payback. It's about reclaiming your worth. Now when I walk that road at dawn, I don't see ghosts anymore. I see beginnings. Fresh paint, laughter spilling from windows that were once boarded shut. And in that sound, that simple, ordinary sound, I finally found what I'd been chasing all along: peace. Sometimes I still hear my father's voice in the wind. It says, "Whatever happens, son, never let the family home leave our name." And I whisper back, "It never did, Dad. It just waited for me to come home." The camera pans upward, sunlight breaking through clouds, warming the rooftops. The house stands quiet, strong, alive again. And the last shot freezes. A man who lost everything, standing exactly where he belongs. Fade to black. Soft piano fades in. Whispered voiceover. This wasn't revenge. This was redemption.